Going live. Oh, did you hit record?
Hold on. I have pushed the record button, and thanks to the piece of tape, the knob is in the right position.
Yep, and your wave looks the same as last time. I have also pushed the record button. It's Tuesday, July 14th, 2020. I'm Rim.
I'm Scott.
And this is Geek Nights. Tonight we are talking about console modding. So, I'm pretty particular about my phones, my smartphones. I like them to be small, but still full-featured. Like, there are tiny Android phones, but those tiny Android phones are like garbage phones.
Yep.
And there were small Android phones, but the last one that anyone made, as far as I can find, that was worth a damn, is the Sony Xperia ZX1 or XZ1. I always forget the order of those two letters.
Is that running an unmodified Android?
While it is not unmodified Android, the weird thing about Sony, unlike all the other phone manufacturers that put their bullshit on there, the Sony Android is 99% regular Android and stays up to date.
Oh, so you have the newest possible Android, whatever the one that is?
Yep, I have Android 9 something right now.
What's the newest Android
I don't
version?
know what the newest one is offhand, actually, because I was just checking this stuff out
11.
because of...
You're 2 versions behind.
That's fine, I can live with that.
I'm
Because
just
the
saying,
phone's basically completely out of support.
But does it not have 11?
I think I can upgrade it to 11. So the reason this comes up is... my phone is multiple years old and finally running out of steam.
Uh-huh.
Like the battery is starting to not last that long. But way back, I bought a second copy of this phone.
Yep.
Just in case to hold out. And I'm pretty sure once that second one dies, I'm just going to go iPhone because there are no Android phones worth a shit after this. And in fact, Sony, their compact phones are now like... so much bigger than this phone that they're bigger than an iPhone. Like, that's their compact phone. Also, they have a weird bulbous back, so I'm a little annoyed by that. But here's the weird thing that happened. I got this other phone out. I start setting it up. It's obviously running like fucking Android 6 something, and I got to run through a million upgrades, and it's been churning and upgrading all day. But then I go down to restore my backup from my current phone to the second one, so I can have 2 phones that are basically identical. And it won't see my backup. And I'm like, all right, what's going on? So then I just start setting it up without the backup because there's nothing on my phone to back up. Everything's backed up like independently of the phone backup. I don't need data from my apps.
Yep.
So I just start setting it up and it says, swipe your fingerprint. And I'm like, there's no fingerprint sensor in this phone because my phone does not have a functional fingerprint sensor. When they released this phone, the European models, as far as I could tell, had a fingerprint sensor, but were missing some LTE bands. The US specific version of the phone had all the LTE bands, but no fingerprint sensor. No one would explain why. The best anyone's guess is, which I think is very plausible, is that there is a patent on hiding the fingerprint sensor like inside of the power button. And that patent seems to only matter in the US. So they basically released a version of the phone without the fingerprint sensor only in the US, and the whole rest of the world got the fingerprint sensor.
Oh, okay.
Turns out I have the second phone I bought is the European version of the phone, and it has the fingerprint sensor.
Oops. So your backup phone is not a...
But as far as I can tell, it does have the bands that when I researched these models, it said it wasn't supposed to have. So I dug into it a little deeper. My US phone also has a fingerprint sensor. There is US specific firmware that turns off the fingerprint sensor and hides it from the OS. It's been in there the whole time. The hardware is there. That button that I thought was just a button for like 4 years is actually a fingerprint sensor.
How about that?
So I wiped it because I'm just fucking with my phone anyway. And there's a utility from Sony, and I put the European firmware on that. Fingerprint sensor works.
Of course.
I can't tell if the missing LTE bands are working or not, though, and I don't have a good way to test that. So
see, this is part of the like unseen advantages of iPhone, right?
Yep.
It's like iPhone 6S from like 4 years ago gets the newest updates. The updates come automatically, right? Everyone with an iPhone has the newest version. You don't have to worry about not having the newest one.
Yep.
There is zero bullshit from carriers on the phone, right? And because everyone's got an iPhone, when it is necessary for like carrier firmware updates to happen to like adjust the radios, they just show up automatically. Like once in a blue moon, there'll be like a message like, there's a carrier update from Verizon, push yes. I'll be like, yes. And then something happens and it's like, okay. And you can go into settings and check it, right? And see what carrier, firmwares are in there or whatever. But, that's how it is.
Yep. So right now, both phones are cycling and like bit by bit updating themselves back to the latest version of Android. And I'm playing with this.
Since I'm in the house and I don't go outside that much, it's like the phone is actually, it's like I was going to buy the new iPhone. Presumably I was going to consider it, at least based on what it contains, right? In September when this new iPhone, I got hiccups suddenly. There's going to be new iPhones in September. I was considering upgrading because I got iPhone 7. There's nothing wrong with it, but it is old, right? And it's like, well, now I barely use the phone. I'm inside all the time. I just use tablet or, computer.
So part of the reason why I was thinking about upgrading
is like maybe I could wait till 2021 or
exactly.
2.
The reason I got the old phone out is because the new phone and the old phone, not just because the battery was going low. It's not that I need it that much. It's that I don't need to have a SIM card in both phones if I'm always in my apartment. If I just want to look at my phone randomly around the house, I could use either phone. The SIM card doesn't do anything for me unless I leave Wi-Fi.
Anyway.
Yep. So we'll see. Now I'll just have two phones. But the clever thing I'm going to do I've seen other people do, I can get both of the phones to have the same TOTP for my Google stuff. So they can be backups for each other. I just scan the same barcode twice with two different phones when I set it up.
Yeah. You can do that.
Yep. So
my strategy has been to print out the piece of paper with the backup codes on it.
I do that as well.
Yeah.
And then I have a YubiKey for some things. But yeah, that was my phone odyssey. I'm trying to figure out if there are any actual hardware differences between these two phones, or if it's literally just they fucked up the firmware specifically in the US.
Probably the firmware.
Yep. So in some gaming news, Microsoft Flight Simulator, I see some people who are going crazy about this announcement, and I see other people who are...
Because when's the last time there's been a Microsoft Flight Simulator?
Yeah, but I see a lot of other people, especially a lot of younger gamers, not understanding why people are going crazy about this update.
Right. Well, you got to understand. So in the 90s, right, when people were first starting to get more powerful computers in their home, 386s, 486s, right?
Yep.
It was like there was a lot of software that existed for PCs that tried to make PCs look powerful and impressive, sometimes by cheating and sometimes not by cheating, right? So Myst is obviously the biggest criminal. If people don't know, everything in Myst was pre-rendered. So they had big fancy computers where at the developers of Myst, right? They rendered all these 3D graphics and they created videos and they just put the videos on the CD-ROM, which had enough storage to hold the videos, right? And then you would play Myst, you'd be like, whoa, this game looks amazing. It's like your graphics card isn't rendering shit. You're just watching videos that look amazing.
Oh, wait. You just said graphics card. We didn't have graphics cards back then.
Some people did. You could have had a Voodoo card or some shit.
My friend Ken
right?
got a Voodoo card early. I got a Creative Graphics Blaster Extreme.
Yeah, I had the TNT too. But anyway, the point is that Microsoft Flight Simulator, right, actually was real-time rendering with your computer, right? It was basically a combination tech demo to sell PCs, right, in the 90s, along with being an actual flight simulator, but for consumers, not for pilots. It was sort of like this in-between space, right, where it was more advanced than incredibly basic, flight simulator.
It was shockingly realistic and accurate.
Right.
For
but
its time.
It wasn't the kind that you could use for actual pilot training. But it would sort of get you a lot of the way there, right? If you played Microsoft Flight Simulator seriously, right, and you could actually, if you were to then go to pilot school, you would know some stuff. You wouldn't
as a kid. School. I actually have an anecdote there. I really practiced Flight Simulator to learn how to fly a Cessna around. And then I went and flew a Cessna, and that actually taught me most of what I needed to know. It didn't really teach me takeoff landing, but it taught me what all the instruments do, and they were accurate, and how to do different kinds of turns and how to use the control surfaces.
Right, exactly. So they haven't made Microsoft Flight Simulator in a long time because tech demos aren't how you sell PCs anymore, and people who care about flight simulating software isn't a large market necessarily, and that software, especially in modern times, is difficult and expensive to develop, right? So why would you make an expensive software flight simulator and sell it to not too many people? But they're doing it. So here it comes. Microsoft Flight Simulator, a new version, the first version since I don't know when the previous version was.
I want to say there was
a
version in like 2012.
I'm going to Google it while you talk.
Microsoft released a new simulator in February of 2012 called Microsoft Flight, designed to replace Microsoft Flight Simulator, aimed at drawing new users into Flight Sim. While it was simpler and incompatible with the old Flight Simulator.
Oh, no. In 2014, there was, somebody else, Dovetail Games, made Microsoft Flight Simulator X Steam Edition. It's like someone else made it. Like Martin Prepfire 3D. Microsoft Flight Simulator X was in 2006.
We got to read up on this because I was not expecting to ever talk about Microsoft Flight Simulator again in my life, except maybe in a panel on like the history of gaming.
Yeah, the point is, it's a big deal and it's come back. So here you go.
Now, even if you don't care, because as a kid, I loved Microsoft Flight Simulator, but I was a kid. I had nothing better to do. I'd be perfectly happy to like fly for an hour just in a normal plane, not really doing much.
Yeah. Well,
not
also,
like that
I think a
today.
lot of the people today who are very serious about flight simulating, right? Microsoft has been out of the game for so long. I don't know if the last time I looked into this scene, which is admittedly many years ago, I think people were playing X-Plane, right? X-Plane was the thing.
Oh, yeah.
Right? It's like there's already, X-Plane 11 flight simulator, right? It's like that's what I think the nerds are playing, and it's like some people fly the planes, some people pretend to be the air traffic controllers, right? It's like they basically have a whole flight network going on of nerds.
The listener pointed out the last proper full world version was Flight Simulator 2006.
Okay.
That was the last Microsoft one. 2006, God.
So 14 years, it is a big news that they're doing it again after that long.
If you don't care at all about flight simulators, here's why this is still really big news for you. It brings HOTAS back to the table.
Mm-hmm.
Because we were just talking about this in light of the Star Wars free space shooter that's coming out from EA that we're cautiously optimistic for. It's EA, so cautious is capitalized there. But there haven't been good joysticks except for very niche purposes for a long time.
Well, they have been, but it's, no one's
except for very
them.
niche purposes. Most joysticks, like 10 years ago, go want to buy a joystick online. Mad Catz had some barely functional ones that fell apart, or there were really expensive semi-custom ones. There weren't a lot of good joysticks unless you're willing to spend a lot of money and a lot of software.
Well, I mean, I think they're good fight sticks for fighting games.
Fight sticks, not flight sticks.
Right. It's like all the games, the major video games where people would go out of their way to buy a controller for, right, are all mouse and keyboard, gamepad, or fighting stick, right?
Yep. A weird nerd would have a HOTAS setup.
Right. Yeah. It's like a really niche people who are willing to spend a lot of money are the only people who've been buying those for the past so many years, right?
Yep. Yeah. But basically HOTAS stands for hands on throttle and stick. It's basically if you're flying a plane or something, like especially a fighter jet or say a TIE fighter, you have one hand on a joystick to control the plane and another hand on a throttle to control the throttle. Like it's a very intuitive, good user experience for controlling that kind of vehicle.
A flying vehicle is how you want to control it, right?
Yep. So, if Microsoft Flight Simulator is coming out again for the first time in forever, coupled with the Star Wars game coming, I feel like it's time for there to be a mid-range of hot-ass or at least high-end joysticks instead of just having the Elite Bespoke and on the other end, literal garbage that falls apart immediately.
Yeah, well, I mean, Logitech, which I think owns or bought Cytec at some point, has somewhat recently updated like the top end hot-ass they have, like the X56 or something.
Yeah, I've got this shitty old like Mad Catz V1.
Yeah, Thrustmaster, which makes the sort of like military accurate ones, they're still in business, so you can still shell out and get like flight stick that looks and feels exactly like the ones in a real F-15, right? You can get those if you want. If
that Star Wars game is good, I probably will get something like this. But don't like, a Thrustmaster HOTAS that acts like an AC-10 Warthog's controls, like it's the same control surface or the same control. $550.
Yeah.
Without the pedals.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
But I'm kind of excited about this too, because if this area starts to exist and that Star Wars game is good, this is some of my favorite kinds of gaming. It also means that these peripherals, like I always wanted to get foot pads, like pedals, but the last few times I looked, they either were crappy or didn't really work with the kinds of games that, like a lot of the games I wanted to use them with, couldn't accept input from multiple devices. Like a lot of those problems have been solved over the years.
Well, I think also the people being trapped inside around the world, I've seen somewhat a resurgence as well in people buying home, like, virtual racing setups, steering wheel, pedals.
Like the Penny Arcade guys are like deep into that racing now.
Right. It's like, it's even because, the real sport people are doing it that way also, right? Is they're all, just some of the actual racing.
Apparently Airbus now, they're not just making fighter jets. They released an Airbus control scheme.
Oh, if you want to do some commercial simulation.
I mean, Microsoft Flight Simulator.
Yeah, sure. So yeah, it's like the home, people have enough space in their home who are trapped there all the time, simulating the large vehicles that you cannot go out and ride for real.
Which is extra fun because those are the kinds of things that were the realm of the arcade. Like that was the main reason I still went to arcades once I had PCs and good consoles, because there were peripherals and controls in the arcade I could not get at home.
Right, but no one wants to buy an arcade. Some people want to buy an arcade
machine. I do, but...
the cost of an arcade machine that plays exactly one game and putting it in your house, right? Versus, right, if you buy like a racing setup, right, with a wheel and pedals and 3 monitors, right, up there, right, and like something like that, you can actually...
There's more than one game you might play with that.
Yeah, you can play several racing games.
Dude, I was watching someone playing...
And it's cheaper. It's cheaper, right?
I watched someone playing Overwatch with one of those rigs. They were Tracer, and they were just strafing and fighting with the wheel.
Yep, why not?
They did terribly.
Yeah, I'm sure they did.
So, the problem is now I still got to wait till October. I'm not buying as much as I want, like, to buy a HOTAS. I'm waiting until October, 20th. Because Star Wars Squadrons comes out October 2nd, and then we need to wait and see if it is worth it.
Yeah, only if we play. I'm going to play Star Wars Squadrons if I even play it at all. I'm going to play it with mouse and keyboard, and if we play it with a group consistently, frequently, the game stays alive, and it's like becomes a serious regular thing. Then I will consider buying.
Yeah, I'm going to use my Mad Catz V1 to try it out.
I'll use a mouse and keyboard,
which drifts ever slowly to the bottom left. I realized when I tried to play TIE Fighter the other day.
I'm sure you can adjust it.
No, I can't. This thing is pretty old and pretty crappy.
All right, whatever.
So, in some other news, you're stuck inside, right? Well, SGDQ is coming. They published the schedule starting Sunday, August 16th.
SGDQ is usually held around 4th of July, but this year it's held a little later, obviously, and it's all online. They're not going to congregate in a single location. But the good news is that while the event will be diminished in that way, it will actually oppositely be enriched, because since the participants, the speedrunners, don't need to travel there.
Yeah.
Right?
I see some names I haven't seen before.
Yeah, that opens the door to a lot of excellent speedrunners who otherwise would not be able to be at GDQ because they would have to travel there, which is a pain in the ass. Now they can have speedrunners from anywhere in the world. There's a lot of people who are like, oh, it's online, I guess I can submit my run now, right? And so if you look at the schedule that was just released, there's a lot of good shit on there. It's like
Virtual Boy Wario Land.
Oh yeah, this is like one of the best schedules,
Alf on the Sega Master System. I love some awful games.
You're right.
Those are my favorite speedruns. Also, a big fan of, I'll talk about this in a minute too, Quest for Glory 1, but the VGA version, not the unwatchable, unplayable EGA version.
Yeah, so if you like to watch GDQ, you're going to have a good time next month.
Powerblade. I'm just scrolling through again. I keep missing. Powerblade's an NES game that was pretty good.
Never heard of it.
Really?
Yep.
Wow. Can't believe you never played Powerblade. Put in an emulator. It's worth 10 minutes of that. You'll see what the deal is, and you'll probably like it okay.
Yeah.
So in some other news, Shantae, the series of games. I just realized there are more of those games than I thought there were. But the Game Boy Color version is getting re-released on a repro cart, but also on the Switch.
Yeah, so I've never actually played a Shantae game, but what I know about them is like it's a series of platforming games that sort of has like this underground popularity. It's like supposedly, and I believe it, they're like really good platformers that just don't get the hype proportional to their quality because they're just platforming games.
Like I see constant low-key hype.
Right, and have
enthusiasts.
mostly been released on handheld platforms, right? So similar to like Golden Sun being a crazy good JRPG, but not getting the attention of like a Final Fantasy because it's in the handheld realm, right? Even though it's sort of dead now.
Yeah.
Hasn't had a new one released in forever, right? So, but Shantae is like they keep making more of them, and they're releasing a new one soon, and along with this release of the new one, they're re-releasing a lot of the old ones. So if you like platforming games and you haven't been in the Shantae scene, I'm probably going to go and check them out because I've heard so much about them.
Yeah. In another brief news, I'm just going to highlight this. Like I said, I'm really big into the little Quest for Glory games. These are some of my favorite games of all time. I never noticed because I have them. I think I bought them somewhere a long time ago and I can play them in DOSBox. There's a package on Steam that packages all up, and they just work with all the patches and bug fixes. The games are as fully patched and playable as they possibly could have been on Earth, and it even supports the importing and exporting of characters between games because that required floppies, and it was kind of a pain to make that work in DOSBox. They have made a launcher that makes that work to import and export characters between the games.
Ooh.
So if you
could bring I know that the standard pattern was similar to actually Golden Sun to where you would beat Quest for Glory 1, then bring your character to 2, then beat the game and bring it to 3.
Yep.
Could you go backwards and forwards?
Only forward, because the games take place in chronological order.
Could you go forwards before you beat the game? Like, can I play half of 1 and go to 2?
Nope. You beat 1, and the end of each game transports you or otherwise gives you access to the next place.
Okay, so
and
it's
the next
only
game is the next
beat
place.
The game and go to the next one. You can't do anything else.
But there was a clever thing too, where there's 3 classes. Like the game is each game is basically 3 games. Like if you pick fighter, thief, or wizard, there's completely different things you can do. Like completely different stories.
Can you change classes when you switch games?
Yes, but more importantly, if you beat any of the games as a fighter,
so I can play 1 as wizard and play 2 as fighter, even transferring my character over.
My favorite way to go is I'd start Quest for Glory 1 as a thief. But you had skill points in the beginning. I gave myself magic, like I opened skills that you can open them at character creation, but not during the game. So I gave myself magic and some fighting skills, so I could do everything. And I just leveled myself up along the way. It took longer. I had to grind a little bit, but I could literally do anything. So I could do the thief quest, but cast the open spell instead of picking the lock.
Okay.
But if you beat the game as a fighter, you had the option to go through a trial in each of the games to become a paladin. See, I had to play at least 2 of the games to be able to be the 4th class.
Okay.
These games are just like very different from all the other adventure games from that era, like those Scum games or
Well, because I think they combined the sort of RPG freedom of like a Baldur's Gate or a JRPG, but along with the point-and-click adventure puzzle solving of a Monkey's Island. Right?
Yeah, because a Monkey Island, like there's one solution to the puzzle, like those kinds of games. It's
literally just a puzzle. This is puzzle plus RPG, sort of like a stat-building visual novel kind of situation.
Exactly. It's a relatively unexplored genre still because not many games like it have ever been made, even now.
Well, a lot of the stat-building visual novels are straight-up visual novel. They don't have the, the point-and-click kind of thing going on.
So, some last little news. Death Stranding. If you needed a reason to not have to buy a PlayStation, it's just on Steam now. You can just play it on a PC.
Anyone who bought some console just to play some Hideo Kojima game, well, look at that. You could have just waited until today, or what? I guess I don't know if today was the day or if it was yesterday or whatever.
It was recent because people I forgot about this game because I wanted to play it someday.
It's like this. I understand this exclusive games that people want to play, right? But there's so few of them. There's so few, and if you just wait, they eventually almost all make it to PC, and if they don't make it to PC, you can emulate them eventually, right? It's like, so it's like I don't see any reason to buy a PlayStation or Xbox, right? No matter, it's like what game, even if there is like a game on there that will never be available anywhere else, right? It's like, okay, you don't need to play the game right now. You can wait and see. And if 5-10 years down the line, it still hasn't been ported, that's the only way to play it. Well, guess what? Now PlayStation 4 or 5 is real cheap. You can play that game no problem. Right? Why would you pay $500, whatever it costs to buy a PlayStation? Because you need to play that game today immediately. The single player game with no multiplayer, no nothing.
But there is
right?
multiplayer interaction in this game.
Oh, I was not aware of that.
I don't think you know what Death Stranding's about.
That's some Hideo Kojima game where like this, like people walking around with like babies and shit. I don't know.
That is not wrong. What you just said.
Yeah, it's some kind of fucked up Hideo Kojima shit. I don't need
That
to
is
play.
also not wrong. It's some kind of fucked up Hideo Kojima shit with babies and walking around.
Yeah, see, I know exactly what this is. That's all I need to know. I need to know nothing else.
I feel like I'm not going to play it today. Like I'm not going to buy it right now and play it. But I feel like once it starts getting cold, I'm still stuck inside because of the pandemic. It's the kind of game I can just play because I can
I feel like if it was a big Steam sale, like less than $15, I might play it, maybe.
Yes, I feel like someday you'll be able to buy a Game of the Year edition of this for pretty cheap.
Maybe.
All right. But anyway, things of the day. What do you got?
What do I have? Oh yeah, so being at home, right? You get a lot more time to listen to music or whatever. So I've been, what I've been doing is not just, eventually even Spotify, you run out of things to listen to, kind of, right? So, you go on Twitch or whatever, YouTube, and you find some DJs, and DJs are great because DJs are people who know a lot of music, and they just play it for you. You don't have to think, you don't have to search, you just push play and you minimize them, and you get some great tunes.
I mean, I've been doing that too, just with like lo-fi beats or with there's a bunch of good future funk channels that they're semi-live or they get
you getting in the future funk game now?
I'm a big fan of future funk.
Okay.
I'm a little more fan of lo-fi beats.
The point is, just being a curious nerd, I've always been curious. Like, hey, all these DJs, they all have, two tables and a microphone, or there was a time period where I know DJs were using like Serato, where they would have turntables, but it was like a magical digital record.
Oh yeah, we were at Katsucon and the DJ, I remember he was explaining to us how it worked, and it was really cool, and we both got really interested in it.
But
and very
nowadays,
wisely
people
did not buy it.
Nowadays, people just have DJ controllers, which are just plastic. They're just basically, Beatmania. Right. Yeah. And then the computer does all the work, but you still have a controller that looks like two turntables and a microphone and a mixer. Right. And I've always wondered, just curious, like I have no plans to ever be a DJ. Right. I know that is not a road I will go down. If I were to purchase even an inexpensive DJ thing from some other aspiring failed DJ who bought the stuff and decided not to use it and sell it.
That is the best way to get most audio equipment, by the way.
That I would then also end up being the person that I purchased it from and selling it, right? And not DJing anything. So I'm not going down that road, but I'm still curious. How do you, if I were to be a DJ, how do you use that thing?
Yeah, like what do all those buttons do?
What do all those buttons do? Obviously, I know that some of them do, right? Just obvious.
I mean, some of it's just a mixer, like.
Right, obviously. I know all that, a lot of the parts, but it's like if you were to be a DJ, like, what buttons do you press? How does it work, right? So I went on YouTube and I tried to watch videos like how to DJ. And a lot of the videos were crappy, obviously, right? They were the professors who were attempting to teach the way to DJ were not doing a very good job. I was able to learn a bit, but they did not go into detail, right? I did not feel as if I've learned how to do this, I could do it now.
Like I feel like a lot of those people will say like things like beat matching, but they never actually explain how the fuck you do that.
Yeah, they didn't really explain in detail, not leaving anything out, right? Not telling you exactly what each button did, when you would use them and why, right? And then I found this guy. This YouTube channel is Club Ready DJ, I think, right? And this guy, I don't know his name. He is selling. I assume
he's Club Ready DJ.
Yeah, he's selling classes that he teaches, so you could learn how to be. His focus is on obviously getting people not just to learn how to DJ, but to like be good enough at DJing that you can go and work in the club, right?
Because that's the way to get good. Get low tier gigs in the area, like that.
Right. So his lesson plan is get you ready to go to the club, just like his name, Club Ready DJ, and he sells classes that will help you learn this. But he has this YouTube channel, and I feel like wow, this YouTube channel is so good. Why would you pay for the classes? I learned everything from these free YouTube videos, right? And it's like these are the best DJ teaching videos, and I still have no plans to DJ. But now I feel like if I had a gun to my head and someone threw a DJ controller in front of me, right, that I would remember this guy, and he taught me well enough in a YouTube video, so good at teaching, that I could maybe not get shot. So if you are interested in DJing or are just curious how DJ stuff works like I was, this is a great YouTube channel. Club Ready DJ is an excellent YouTube teacher. And if you want to teach something else and you want to make other instructional YouTube videos about some other topic, you should learn from Club Ready DJ on how to do that, because he's great.
All right. So you're all familiar with Rocket League. It's a popular game.
It's still alive. People still play it.
From what I gather, I had some unrelated conversations with people. It seems to be pretty well agreed that Rocket League might have the most toxic player community on Earth. Apparently,
when I played it, it sort of. I mean, there was toxicity when I played it when it was new in its first year of competitive play or whatever.
Yep.
But the toxicity mostly came, at least when I was playing it, right,
from the scrubs who thought they were good but they weren't.
Right.
Yep.
Exactly. Or it's like you'd be stuck in these low tier matches, and there'd be like some. The typical stuff, right?
Wind who's just screaming, "I'm not bronze tier, I'm not bronze tier," as he descends into bronze tier.
I was under the impression that over time, since the game isn't so new anymore, the only people still playing it, which are still a lot of people, right? Were people who really cared about it and were good at it, right? And all the other people had sort of left for other games. And thus I had believed, perhaps falsely, that toxicity had decreased because it was pretty much like, the only people still playing Rocket League are pros who care about Rocket League. Right?
Of course, what's interesting? If that happened, though I don't know how Rocket League's tiering works, but in most matchmaking tiering, it's based more on a curve, so that if it's all great players, someone's still going to be bronze tier.
Maybe. Who knows?
But anyway, Rocket League kind of already existed a long, long time ago, and I have this video that is people in 1927 driving early, shitty little cars that look kind of like Rocket League cars, driving around, pushing a giant ball, literally just playing Rocket League with real cars. Mm-hmm. It was Push Ball was a game that people were playing. And in fact, people still play today. I found a website with a bunch of photos of a group that plays push ball with cars like this today.
Okay, like RC cars? Or
no, full-size cars. They're in these full-size, really old-looking cars, driving it around in a field.
Like Model T?
Yeah, like Model T looking cars with little cages around them.
So but one's playing.
This does not look safe.
Like Toyota Corolla or whatever.
No, that would be great. These do not look safe at all.
Okay.
And they're driving them around at speed, just trying to ram this ball into a net on either side of a field.
I guess they don't have rockets though to get.
They don't have rockets.
No.
I don't know what happens if you kill the other player, because I know Rocket League has rules about that. Sure. But there's video from people from 1927 of people playing this. I have to imagine that at least 4 people died anytime this game got played. This does not look cool.
Okay.
But the reason I found this video is almost more fascinating. Someone tweeted something, and it was talking about sports being played like 100 years ago, and it mentioned horse pushball. And I was like, what's horse pushball?
See now this is interesting that you mentioned horse pushball, because I imagine that if there's a horse version of a sport, the car version came later.
Yeah.
So why would it be pushball and horse pushball? If there was a horse version, shouldn't the horse version be pushball and the car version would be car pushball?
So I went even deeper. The original game was just pushball in the late 1800s, and it was humans. Imagine soccer, but there's one giant ball that's taller than any human, and people just fucking have a fist fight over it until they push it into one of the goals.
All right.
That's a sport. Good. It's a real thing. It was popular. Apparently, Yale University had their own variant called bladder ball, which was such a problem on campus that the police got involved and riots occurred on a regular basis.
Okay.
Where basically every now and then someone would bring out the bladder, this giant beach ball looking thing, and then the students would all just riot over like trying to steal it and push it into their own dorm or whatever. Like it was a thing. So yeah, pushball was a human sport. People started playing it with horses, which does not look super safe. And then they started playing it in the 20s and 30s with cars. It seems like today the human version and the car version are the only versions that are still played.
That's probably for the best.
Yeah, because the horse version looks... I don't know how well they cared for the horses, but I worry a little bit about it based on some of the footage I found.
Mm-hmm.
I do not ever
I
want
worry about any animal usage in sport.
Yeah, pretty much. But yeah, if you want to go play pushball, it looks like there are people who are more than willing to endanger you for that purpose. In the meta moment, we're stuck at home like we've been. Nothing's really changed. We don't really have a significant update since the last time we talked.
Yeah, PAX Online is the next convention.
Yep, there will be no PAXs this year because the state of Pennsylvania basically said nothing's happening this year, so no PAX Unplugged, which obviously there wasn't going to be a PAX Unplugged.
Yeah, but now it's official.
Yeah.
PAX Unplugged hasn't said it's official, but the state of Pennsylvania has made the point moot, right? That there are no events for the next 6 months. Well, that's that, right?
And based on how things are going in Texas, I'm 100% sure there will not be a PAX South.
Yeah, I feel like there won't be. There could be a MagFest Online. That might be interesting.
Yeah, we'll see.
Maybe some other conventions that we have not gone to because they're, physical distance.
I think
right?
Online Kineticon already just happened. It came too quick for me to get ready for it.
Yeah, I don't know how many people watched it even.
A lot of online cons are not getting a lot of traction, but there's a few that are coming together that look like they're going to put on a good show. That we're going to be at PAX Online, virtual PAX, and we're going to be at the virtual Crunchyroll Expo, and we're trying to figure out what other online cons we want to do. If there's a virtual con that you want us at, email us, email me, rim@fretrecruit.com, because I'm actively currently sorting out our virtual convention schedule for the rest of the year.
Yeah. Also, in terms of online cons that I will attend, but not be a speaker, just be an attendee.
All right, Game Devs of Color.
Yeah, the Game Devs of Color is going online. They're usually in the summer around this time. I think if it was still scheduled,
submissions closed relatively recently. You probably saw me tweeting about it a whole bunch.
Yeah, I think it was if there hasn't been a pandemic, it would have been last week or a couple weeks ago. It would have been recent, right? Or it would have been very close to this time. But I think they're making it in September or something. The online version.
I'm trying to find because the Google likes to point at their old website. Here we go, 2020 Expo.
September 19th online. Yes. Right, so yeah, it's going to be around. Isn't that close to PAX Online time?
It is close to PAX Online and also close to Crunchyroll Expo. Everyone's doing September.
That's all right.
They don't overlap yet, as far as I can see.
Of course, you also mentioned SGDQ, which is going to be August something.
Yep. But Game Devs of Color Expo is notable in that every time we've gone, the panel content is fantastic.
I mean, in terms of the quality to quantity ratio of panel content, I'd say it is probably the best of any con, period.
It's better than PAX in terms of quality versus quantity.
Even if you go to MagFest, right, where you have your mages content, you've got it diluted by so much. Not all the non-mages content at MagFest is meh, but this is the meh stuff. Right?
But it's not. But the talks at GDOC tend to be the A-tier talks you see from other gaming cons.
Exactly, right. Whereas you go to say PAX, it's there's a lot of industry garbage filling up the schedule, right? Yep. But Game Devs of Color Expo, literally every talk is terrific. That's the whole schedule. There's nothing to skip. You can just sit in there all day. Just the 1-2 panel rooms. Just sit there. You don't got to do nothing else.
All right. So I think we should just get right into it. Modding consoles is a thing. It's less of a thing for us than it used to be. At least it was something that I didn't think I'd ever revisit again in my life. But as Scott's going to talk about, now we have a lot of old gaming hardware that can actually just be made better with modern technology.
Someone posted, Cold Guy posted in our forum, listener Cold Guy, and he posted this video. We could link to the video.
I'll pull it up.
I think the video was an advertisement in disguise, but I guess it worked, even though I recognized it was an advertisement. But basically, it was about upgrading a Game Boy Advance, right? Someone who makes Game Boy Advance retro modding products, right, sent all their products to this guy who has a YouTube channel, and the YouTube guy made a video about upgrading his Game Boy Advance with all the products, And I said, wow, that's amazing. I would like to do that as well. So I purchased all the same exact products and I upgraded my Game Boy. I had a Game Boy Advance sitting there unused. It's my original Game Boy Advance. I bought it on release day, but now it is no more. It is now, its motherboard has now been inserted into this other case, right? With a different screen attached. And the battery is changed. And a tiny, tiny amplifier has been placed in between the motherboard and a replacement speaker.
Oh yeah, did you put the hiss filter in it too?
There's no real hissing noises, so it's not really. Through.
Yeah, I feel like the hiss is something that only some people really care about it, and no one else notices
I haven't
it.
really heard it. The audio is just, it sounds loud and it sounds great. So I haven't actually have to try the headphone hole. I'll do that after the show probably. But yeah, it's like I upgraded this Game Boy Advance to now the screen is an IPS screen. It's like we're talking a screen as good as, not a Retina screen, but like think of an iPhone pre-Retina. That's the kind of screen that this Game Boy Advance has, right? The brightness and the colors are just outstanding. You can actually control the brightness, which you couldn't do, right? The volume, because of the amplifier, can go way louder out of the speaker, which is great. And the battery has been replaced with a rechargeable lithium-ion battery with USB-C. So no more AA's, just plug it into the wall, right?
That's pretty exciting, that part.
And it's like, it's a Game Boy Advance, so it can play GBA games and Game Boy Color games and Game Boy games. And if you get a flash cart, it can also play like NES games with an emulator, right?
If you get a flash cart, that everyone's just backing up games, not pirating them, just backing them up.
Yeah, So yeah, it's like I had a DS Lite, and a DS Lite, has a backlit screen, has two screens. And that can also play with a flash cart, right? Game Boy Color, NES, and GBA games, and DS games, obviously. This can do everything that the DS Lite can do, except the DS games, right? And the DS Lite could do SNES games and sort of Genesis games, but the resolution of the screen was too low, so it would either stretch or cut off part of the SNES games. It wasn't great. And, a DS has two screens, but one screen of a DS is where you'd be playing most of these games. And those screens would be, one DS screen is smaller than one GBA screen physically, right? And the form factor is not as great. So like this upgraded GBA is actually, other than not being able to play DS games and Super Nintendo games, is like the best handheld, right? It's like, incredible, right? If I could play, if there's a game that I could play on this, I'd rather play it on this than on a DS or even 3DS, right? So that's pretty awesome. And, so I had to do some electronics, soldering and whatnot, but it was actually very forgiving, right? I did a real shitty job of soldering, and it still worked perfectly on the first try. And also, I didn't need to do the soldering, right? If you don't want the amplifier, that's actually the hardest part. You don't have to solder that. You could just not do the amplifier, just keep the speaker that came with the GBA. The upgraded screen, you don't have to do any soldering unless you want the brightness controls, which is just 3 wires. It was very easy. And putting it into the case, the battery doesn't require any soldering at all. And putting it into the case is actually the hardest part. It's just a matter of screwdriver, right? But it was a little tricky to get all the buttons and stuff, lined up, especially the L and R buttons. They were a huge pain in the ass. Right, but I did manage it, and now I'm never opening this again.
Yep.
If it breaks,
Well, it is funny. That's one difference between there's different levels of risk for modding. Because when I was really young, we had a Game Gear, and there was a mod that I'd read about on a BBS that people had talked about, where you would futz with the way the batteries work to give it a lot longer battery life. Something to do with the fact that the LCD only used like 1 or 2 of the batteries, and all the rest of the batteries powered the rest of the machine. Yep. But the LCD batteries would burn out the fastest because of that backlight, because that was ancient LCD technology.
Oh, yeah.
And there was a mod of like soldering and moving stuff around to put more batteries in just for the LCD. And if you did that, the whole thing would last like 5 or 6 hours on one set of batteries instead of like 1 or 2. But I was a kid. I theoretically could have made this mod based on these instructions I downloaded from a BBS that I dialed into. However, I could not afford to buy a new Game Gear if I fucked it up. And if I told my parents that I cracked open the Game Gear and took a soldering iron to it and now it's broken, they definitely would not have bought me a new one. The risk was so high compared to the reward that I was willing to just keep buying AA batteries my entire childhood.
Yeah, I mean, what it comes down to is, we have these pieces of hardware, right? Computers, game consoles, right? And even though time has gone on, it's newer hardware doesn't run that old software,
Yeah.
right? But if you
Emulators exist, but they're not perfect.
No, they're not. And there are like clone consoles you can get, which are pretty cool, right? That exist. But even so, it's like, okay, I'm just gonna buy basically a modern NES clone machine, right? It's like I have an NES right here. Why would I do that, right? It's like, hey, this NES is still perfectly good, right? But the problem is I can't hook it up to my TV because it doesn't have HDMI, right? Well, guess what? We have people make things so you can add HDMI to an NES, right? Why not go for it, right? It's like, oh, you got a Commodore 64, add HDMI output to it, add some kind of audio output that is easier to use.
Well,
right?
Speaking of the cold guy again, way back, Pat actually gave me the Atari 2600 with the video out mod, so it doesn't need
the S video out.
Yeah, so it doesn't need RF to connect to anything. So to this day, like, well, I guess now I can't have a party, but we occasionally just turn on the 2600 and play Outlaw on a modern TV with the actual hardware.
Right. When these things were new, they were state-of-the-art technology. There was no upgrading to be done to it, right? It's like, what are you going to upgrade on your Nintendo Switch, right?
Yep.
It's like people change the plastic shells on them and stuff like that, but
it's
like
the original Game Boy, you can't see that screen for shit. There's no backlight in there.
No.
That's why it lasted so long compared to the Game Gear.
Right, but it's like there's nothing to upgrade on a Switch. You could style it, right? You could maybe make controllers that are better if you need maybe accessibility reasons or comfort reasons.
Most people seem to
reasons.
Most people seem to do on their Switches cosmetic mods, like they'll get custom controllers that look cool.
Yeah, but if you want to go out and say upgrade the screen on your Switch, it's like, what screen are you gonna get? There's no better screen you can go buy, right? There's nothing that it's using the best screen available for a Nintendo Switch is already in the Switch, right? HDMI output. It's like it has HDMI output. What are you going to do to it, right? It's like, come on. But these older consoles, not only can you upgrade a lot of, especially the input-output parts of them, right? You don't really, you can also, what was I saying? The input-output parts, right, are definitely the interchangeable
But you can also solve
parts.
problems that were caused by the limitations of the state-of-the-art technology of the time. Like the Game Gear, I've seen some mods, but they seem a lot harder to pull off because that's older hardware, like way older hardware. You can replace the LCD with a new, modern LCD display that just works way better.
Yep. But what I was trying to say was not only can you upgrade, the input-output parts with more modern stuff, but when that technology was new, when a Game Boy was new, right? If you opened it up, that was actually complicated shit in there for the day, right? Nowadays, you open up a Game Boy and the inside is pedestrian. It's like
you can look at the board and like see the traces and understand what's going on. There's not that.
It's like it's not actually a complicated piece of electronics. Like when I opened up this GBA, even the inside looked like an electronics, other than a few CPUs that had like some tiny surface mount stuff that like a machine might have to do. It's like the vast majority of the motherboard was like, oh, that looks like an electronics project kit that I would do, buy online and do for fun, right?
The funniest was when the console I modded first in my life, when I actually was willing to do it, was that PS1. I bought a PS1 and I wanted to put a mod chip in it. I remember I cracked it open. I was so worried, like, how am I gonna get this mod chip in here? What if I fuck it up? But when I actually cracked it open, you know what was in there? Just like one really cheap looking green like breadboard with some like really shoddy looking solders on it and a bunch of solid state components and chips, and that was it. Like, it was just one little board. It was so simple that I almost laughed.
It's like the older stuff is simple enough to be worked on by an amateur, hobbyist at home, right? The new stuff, it's like a piece, I guess even, PC motherboards, I guess even pretty much any x86 motherboard is too complicated to mess with.
Yeah, I'm not going to solder anything to my motherboard to overclock. Though there were things people would do along those lines to overclock chips back in the day.
Right. So, but I think the combination
drawing
of
the contact trace to remove the FSB limiter on an Athlon.
Yep. But yeah, a combination of, the simplicity of the older devices relative to modern times, right? The possibility of upgrading due to availability of superior components, right? And also financially, right? You can buy a pile of broken GBAs, right? Like how many? I bet you could go on eBay and probably buy GBAs with broken screens, right?
Oh yeah,
Way cheap.
deploy these mods and then just resell them.
And then just replace the screens on them with brand new amazing screens that you bought, right? And it's like, it's not that cheap though. That's the thing you have to understand, right? It's like,
True.
okay, you're buying a brand new amazing IPS screen. It's like, that's not a cheap thing. It's like, it's a brand new awesome part, right? So it's like the upgrading, it's not necessarily inexpensive. But it totally works.
But what's
right?
cool is that it can preserve some aspects of the experience of using old technology while at the same time modernizing or discarding some of the more negative aspects of that old technology. So it's still true to the game, but like the experience is better.
Yeah, we don't have to use little worm lights on our GBAs, right? If we all get awesome screens in them.
I remember trying to play multiplayer Advance Wars. I had the worm light, and then I had the link cable plugged into the back of the worm light. And if you even looked at it the wrong way, the game would crash.
Yeah, we don't have to have batteries dying because I put a lithium-ion battery in the AA slot, right?
Yep.
All that kind of stuff.
Now, that PlayStation mod, I'm going to admit fully, the sole reason I put that PlayStation mod in was to pirate games.
Yeah, see, that's the thing where, even though the PlayStation at the time was a brand new PlayStation, right? Something that, and it was, a modern technology at the time. I guess it was somewhat modern because PS2 was out already. But,
yeah, it was the PS1, so it was the re-release of the original PlayStation with the small form factor.
Right, but still, that wasn't as you don't want to mod at the time. Nowadays, you'd be like, whatever, right? But back in the day, modding that wasn't as careless as upgrading a GBA. Like if I broke this GBA, I'd be like, oh no, I'd buy another GBA.
If I broke that, I could not have afforded to buy another one. I did not have money.
Right, I have friends who have spare GBAs lying around unused, just like I do. I could have gotten more GBAs, probably for next to nothing, right? To try again. But yeah, messing up that PS1 would have been not great, but it made economic sense because the piracy possibilities made up for the risk of the mod chip. Right? I remember my friend in high school, he had a PlayStation 1 with a mod chip that he put in there, and he would go to Blockbuster, rent games, copy them to blank CDs, right? And then return them. And he was getting he basically had a huge binder in 1997 or 8, just like full of like hundreds of PlayStation
I knew
games.
a kid like that. And that is partly why, because he had a 4-pin mod chip.
And he was getting these games that cost $50-$60 for, $3-$4 for a Blockbuster rental.
The thing is, when I got the PS1, my sole actual goal was to play Dance Dance Revolution.
And nothing else.
I needed a mod chip, even if I didn't want to pirate them, because they were not released in the US. So I had to get Japanese games that were region locked on the PS1. The mod chip would have also removed the region locking. However, I then could not actually get a hold of legitimate copies of these games, not just because I couldn't afford them, but I couldn't find them.
They were very expensive, even if you could find them.
But right around then is when Red Octane came on the scene and did Netflix of PlayStation games. And they had every international game. So we signed up for an account, and every week a DDR game came. I copied it. Like I ripped the ISO out. I mailed it back that day. And I just got as many games as I could for 1 month, and I canceled Red Octane.
But yeah, there's whole scenes of people out there now who are modding various consoles for various purposes, right? There are people modding consoles to help with speed running so they can like debug the console to see what's going on in there, right? You've got people who are modding consoles for chiptunes purposes, right? So they can get their Game Boy to do better at, get some extra access to the synthesizer or whatever, that kind of stuff. But basically it's just like people are getting, now that the possibilities are out there, the stuff is available cheap and the technologies are available. Just like there's the scene is really cool. And if you have any interest in electronics, it's like, like your game consoles, as if you're a nerd, are like your number one, they're like top tier electronics, right?
Yeah.
So it's like when you're doing like your little electronics projects, right? Making like an LED blink, it's like, that's not very exciting, right? But like, dude, upgrading a GBA suddenly is like, whoa, that's like a whole new world. Like you went straight from crappy hobbyist electronics project with your soldering iron all the way up
I made an accumulator.
Right, and then you start doing game console shit. It's like now you can see, the real biz.
But I also think right now is a golden age for this that will never come again, because we're at this point where all the consoles that came before us, not all of them, but like many of them, like up to like the Game Boys, Game Boy Advances, some of the PlayStations, like up to the PS2 maybe, the electronics are simple enough for us to mess with pretty easily. The newer ones that are coming out, I think, are going to be a lot more difficult to mod effectively.
Yeah, I think that even when the Switch is really old,
like I don't think we're really going to be modding the Switch. They're going to be emulating.
Even a 3DS, right? I think it's like, okay, on a 3DS you could probably swap out the screen, right?
But
if you think about, right, it's like you think about phones these days, right? It's like, when it comes to cell phones, because 3DS is about cell phone level.
I'm not going to mod
right?
my old Palm smartphone so I can use it today.
Nintendo Switch is definitely cell phone level tech, right? In terms of miniaturization level, right? It's got a touch screen, whatever. Is that the peripherals, I think, there's still things to be done there, replacing screens, messing with the audio, messing with the inputs, right, and the outputs.
Yeah, but I think it'll be more for preservation and less for upgrade.
Yes, the actual motherboards themselves, like to mess with a Switch motherboard, to mess with an iPhone motherboard, like people can fix your screen on your iPhone. They can replace the battery on your iPhone. You can put a different speaker or fix the camera maybe on your iPhone. You can maybe mess with that, right? But it's like, to actually mess with anything on the board is like, that is too much, I think, for anyone without some serious equipment and skills, right? It's, you're better off just making a new phone than doing that.
But it's like we're just in this sweet spot now of the price versus availability versus access versus risk of messing with like these earlier eras of consoles in cool, fun ways.
And I think what's actually going to happen as time goes on, right? Like I said, the newer devices, 3DS kind of forward, are too complicated to mess with in a significant way, right? And they don't have these glaring flaws that need to be improved either, right? That the older devices have. And what's going to happen is, even though now we can mod the old ones, I think what will happen as time goes on is the old ones will become rarer, right? They're going to become rare and more expensive. So right now you could go and load up on Game Boys, Game Boy Colors, Game Boy Advances, right? All this sort of stuff, and mod to your heart's content.
Imagine being the person like 20 years from now who rolls into like a MagFest and is like, sets up the room of, all right, here's a room with 20 chairs and 20 of these ancient Game Boy Advances that still work.
Right. 20 years from now, how hard will it, unless Nintendo or someone decides to remake them, right? Which I think, there will be, right? Is like there's a lot of people remaking old, like I said, you can buy like clones of an NES, a modern machine that plays NES cartridges, right? They make those. But, to get an actual Game Boy 20 years from now, I don't know how easy that'll be to get one, right? Considering how many will be broken, lost, or modded, right? So... there are, however, people who are doing things such as like the Raspberry Pi Zero Game Boys, where basically instead of buying an old Game Boy, what you do is you get a Raspberry Pi Zero, which is just a tiny computer.
It's a lot like making a MAME cabinet, but making a MAME portable.
Exactly, is you just make a Game Boy out of a different computer entirely with emulators on it, right? And that's also a road to go down. And I don't think that will ever really go away. That actually only become easier as smaller computers get faster and more powerful. So that's, I think, the alternative.
Yep. So now's the time if you want to, now is the time, both because of the pandemic and you're stuck inside and because of the availability. You want to try this out, do it now, because much like PC overclocking, the window where that made sense and was easy to do and worth it to do was pretty brief.
Yeah, and if you're looking to not be creative and just sort of do existing stuff, there's lots of companies who are making all these upgrade products and selling them and tricking people into making ads for them on their YouTube channels.
But they come with really good instructions. Like if you've never soldered before, poke at some solder a little bit, and then you'd probably be able to pull this off.
All over YouTube and all the websites that sell the products, they realize they can't sell you a screen replacement for your GBA if they're not also giving you instructions that make you feel like you're confident enough that you can install it yourself, right? So, and some of them are selling pre-modded ones, but they charge an arm and a leg for that, right? Which, as they should. So go out there and, these companies, they have very limited runs on these products. It's like they'll make these things, sell them, they'll sell out, then maybe they'll make some more, maybe not, right? Maybe something better will come out.
Yep.
So you sort of have to stay on top of it and like order stuff as it becomes available. And watch, these companies, I think they exist now. I think they're going to eventually, like, the market for this stuff will go away. So it's sort of like you have to go, if you want to be a customer of any of these companies, you got to go find them now. So yeah, use your Google skills. You can find them.
All right. I think that's a fine show.